Welcome. This is a sixth chords. This is a sixth chords guitar lesson, all about sixth chords, guitar chord shapes to play them, why they exist, where they come from, the music theory, how to work on them. Let's dive in. I'm Jared from SoundGuitarLessons.com. This is episode 14 of my series on chords and harmony and the theory behind them, specifically on the guitar. All these lessons stand on their own, but hey, watch them all. Sixth chords, what are they? Right now, if you say sixth chord, guitar-wise or not, just in music in general, it means that you are adding a sixth, a note that is 6 notes above the root of a triad chord. I say right now because this type of chord with 1, 3, 5 and then a 6 added used to be called, and still can be called, an added sixth chord, even though now we just say sixth chord. But that was to distinguish it from something in classical music analysis that was called a sixth chord already, which meant that a chord was in first inversion. In popular music, that language isn't used for inversions, so just saying 6 instead of added 6 is now the norm. There are other type of sixth chords specifically in classical music analysis, chords like something called a Neapolitan sixth chord. There's also a few types of a type of sixth chord called an augmented sixth. But we are not talking about any of those in this video. We're just talking about chords that have a 1, 3, 5, and a sixth added. I did a video a bit ago thoroughly explaining the music theory of seventh chords, where we take 1, 3, 5 of a triad, and then you can add a 7 on top of that to make a 7th chord and various types of seventh chords. This is that same logic, but we're adding a 6 instead of 7. Here's a D major sixth chord, which would just be labeled as D6. This has a complete triad in it. This bottom note is the root, open D. This is the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this high note is the third, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3. And then this open B string is the sixth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In this context, we can make this chord because this normal D chord shape, that is the most common open string chord shape for D on the guitar, we have root, fifth, just like we said, and third on the top, and this note that is now on the second string, that's a root again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So we have the root twice. That's why we can afford to take that note away on the second string and replace it with that open B, which is the 6 of the chord. Another way you can find the 6 if you know where the root is, especially if you have a doubled root and you're going to replace that, you can count down from the root. 1, 7, 6, and find it that way instead of counting up. Check out episodes 2 and 3 of this series to learn all about how to count with the major scale just like that all over the guitar. Super valuable thing to be able to do. So that was major 6. There's also a chord called minor 6. To play D minor 6, we can start with a D minor chord and add the 6 in the same way, counting to it from whatever direction we want. Let's go ahead and count down. This is the root, this is the fifth, just like before. The third on top is now a flat third, and I would find that by counting in the same way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, flat 3. Excuse the singing. That's high for my voice, obviously. So this root here, 1, 5, 1, is doubled. So I'm gonna count down. 1, 7, 6. And there's a note in between there I skipped. 1, 7, flat 7, 6, just to show it's all in between there. Now, it's a minor triad with that major 6 added in. On a minor 6 chord, you're still adding the major 6 interval above the root. You're adding a major 6 on top of a minor triad. So you don't add a minor 6th interval. You don't add a flat 6 to the chord. You still add a major 6. That D minor 6 that we just did there, how I counted down from the root, if we actually do that with the chord present the whole time, we get this really cool kind of eerie, very popular progression. That's the same progression from Stairway to Heaven and many, many other things, where we get moving that inner line. So that's kind of fun. This is one place where minor 6 would come up at the end of that little sequence. We have D minor major 7, D minor 7, D minor 6. So using that D shape, the major and the minor shape, it's pretty straightforward to find the 6 and just turn it into a 6 chord. Not every chord especially chord shape on the guitar, that you try to add a 6 to is going to be that straightforward. You often will have to shuffle things around a bit more to make room for it and figure out how to fit things in without sacrificing maybe another important note. But the theory structure is always the same. You have 1, 3, 5, 6 for major 6 and 1, flat 3, 5, 6 for minor 6. And I'll give you more chord shapes that you can practice with and study at the end of the lesson here, so you don't have to just find things from scratch, but I want you to understand how you could find it from scratch if you wanted to. But before I give you those chord shapes, something very interesting to point out. If we take this D major chord shape that we just learned and we move the notes around, and we're going to move the notes around using this fretboard logic method where we move notes with an octave interval shape or a unison interval shape, and I did 2 videos on that recently, so I'm going to use that here, and you can check those videos out if you want to know more how it works. But watch how I move these notes around to have the same notes but in a different order. So I'm going to go ahead and take the open B and I'm going to move it an octave down to this B here. Okay, so now I have, okay, so now that's my voicing and I'm not playing the open B string. All right, now I'm gonna take the open D and I'm gonna move it up an octave to here. So now same notes, just moving around. So different inversion of the same chord. I'm gonna take the top voice and move it down an octave here and we get this chord shape. This chord shape is pretty standard. It might be familiar to you. It looks just like a minor 7 chord shape. So this is B minor 7. If this low note is the root now, it's B minor 7 with the 1, the root, the 5, the flat 7, and the flat 3. So D major 6 and B minor 7 have the exact same notes. So when is it one and when is it the other? The short answer is that it depends on how the chords are treated. This progression is clearly going back and forth between D major 6 and B minor 7 because of the really strong root movement on the bottom between the 2 chords, even though the notes in both of those chords are the exact same notes, just in a different order. So if I was going to improvise over that progression, that means I could just think of the whole thing as one big B minor 7 chord, even though the chords underneath clearly sound like they're changing. So that progression was pretty straightforward in terms of how each chord is being treated, how we should interpret each chord, but it's not always that obvious. If we play this chord again, this D major 6, and from there we move to an E major chord, and then I'll make it an E7, and then we go to A. We'll do that again, D major 6, E, E7, A. In that case, that chord could easily be D major 6 moving to E, or it could be the first inversion of B minor 7 moving to E. More on inversions in a few videos from now, so don't worry about what that means yet. The point is that this is where music theory can start to actually be a little bit of real theory and not just nuts and bolts music facts. This stuff can be open to interpretation. 2 musicians could be playing the exact same thing. One person could think of it as a certain type of structure, the other person could think of it as something different, and they can both be right. So as we learn more, we don't want to get too hung up on knowing all the correct answers for everything, but instead we want to at least have a way that we can interpret and make sense of and think about something that we're playing that works for us. The minor 6 chord has this same dual interpretation potential. Check out the standard A minor chord. A minor chord. I'm going to add a 6 to the top. I'll go ahead and count from this root 1, and I'll count as a major scale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 just to find the 6, but then I'm putting that on top of the minor chord. So now we have root 5, root flat 3, 6. Nice spicy minor 6 chord. And that really changes the quality of a minor chord, right? A minor and then minor 6. It's that mysterious kind of film noir sound. Okay, now I'm going to take this top note. This is F sharp, and it's the 6 of that chord. I'm going to go ahead and move it down to this is an E string, so same note down here, same note on the lowest E string. I'm going to make that A minor shape above and play this below. What does that shape look like? If you checked out my videos on seventh chords, I'm practicing seventh chords, that should look familiar. It is a half diminished chord shape. Or you can see it as the A minor chord with the 6 on the bottom. 6, 5, 6, flat 7, 7, 1, 1, 7, flat 7, 6. So A minor 6 and F sharp half diminished have the exact same notes in them. You could say that what we think of as the minor 6 shape and the half diminished shape, you could say that those are inversions of each other. If you learn all your inversions of the half diminished chord, one of those shapes is going to look like the root position minor 6 chord and vice versa. So pretty crazy stuff. If your brain is hurting right now, if you're confused, that is totally normal. That is totally okay. We need to be exposed to these things many times in many different ways, and including in our own playing, for it to really eventually feel like it clicks. If you're hearing this information for the first time and you feel lost, just know that you are exactly on the right track. At that phase, you just want to kind of soak it in and let it just kind of wash over you like a new language. And enough exposure like that, things will start to solidify and build on each other little by little. So you're exactly in the right track if you're like, what in the world are you talking about? And if some of this was already familiar to you, then you're probably able to fill in some of the gaps that were there as you expose yourself to this same information again and again from different angles. It's all part of the process. We should not expect that we are exposed to something once and then that means that we know it. So why would we use these sixth chords? It's funny, I get asked that sometimes, especially on like social media. People ask these kinds of things. Why should I play this? It's like, well, there's no reason you should play this other than that you want to hear the sound. You know, if you want to hear it, then that's it. And I think being curious about the theory is a great way to explore it too. But as far as using it in music, you use it if you want the sound. Adding a sixth to a chord adds some color to the chord. It adds some richness. It adds some depth. It adds texture. And just a fun little tip, major 6 and major 7 are totally interchangeable with each other. So if you see a major 6th chord in a song, that you can play major 7 instead. If there is a major 7 chord in a song, you can play major 6 chord instead. Anytime you can swap those. However, minor 6 and minor 7 are not interchangeable, so you can't just freely exchange those in the same way. A great way to practice sixth chords and really any type of chord is to go through the chords of a key diatonically, the chords that are available from the scale, and ask on each chord, can I add a 6? Can I add a major 6 above the root of this chord? If so, you can add it there and make a sixth chord. Not every chord in a key is going to have a major 6th available above the root of that chord. Sometimes there will be instead a minor 6, just the way that the structure of the scale works. If you count in the scale from the root, you'll hit a minor 6 instead of a major 6. So some chords through the chords of a key are not able to be made into sixth chords. Of course, I should say that going out of a key is totally fine. You can do anything you want, and I will be talking specifically about ways to play chords that are outside of a key very soon, so stay tuned. But let's go through the chords in the key of E major and add a 6 to every chord that we can. Okay, the first chord in the key of E is E major. And here's the E major 6, adding the 6. I'm just going to give you the chord shapes for these because you get the idea of where the 6 comes from and all that stuff. Second chord in the key is F sharp minor. If we make that into an F sharp minor 6 chord, we get this shape. This is the most common way to play a minor 6 chord on the guitar, especially because it's a movable shape, so you can use that to play any minor 6th chord along the 6th string. The third chord of the key is G sharp minor. We cannot add a major 6 to that chord. That's one of these ones where if you did count up from it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in the scale, 6 notes from the root, we get a minor 6 instead of a major 6. So just saying, you don't have to totally understand what I mean by that, but we cannot add a 6 to that chord. The fourth chord of the key is A major, and adding a 6, beautiful chord shape, I love this one. A major with that 6 on top. The fifth chord of the key is B. I'm going to play it over here. And then if we make that into a B major 6, this is the most common shape to play a major 6th on the guitar. And again, this is a movable voicing because there's not an open string in it. So you can play a major 6 chord with this shape anywhere on the guitar. You can play every single major 6 chord, move it along the 6th string. Great, the next chord is C sharp minor. We cannot add a major 6 to that because of the structure of the scale. The last chord is D sharp diminished, and we cannot add a major 6 to that because it doesn't exist in the structure of the scale. To get the chord shapes for all the sixth chords through a bunch more keys, you can grab my free chord chart in the description. Lastly, I just want to point something out and kind of hint for something that's coming up, because this note that is 6 notes above the root of a chord, and we're calling it the chord tone 6, that exact same note can be called the 13 of a chord instead. Same note, different label. Sometimes it's called 6, sometimes it's called 13, but there are very specific rules for when you call it one or the other. For now, we're just looking at chords that have 1, 3, 5, and 6, and when those are the notes in the chord, then you call that note a 6. We'll be learning all about 9, 11, and 13 chords in this series very soon. Next week, I'm going to show you something called shell voicings. It's a really fun concept and a very freeing type of chord structure, especially if you're interested in jazz guitar, so don't miss that next lesson. Hit that thumbs up for me if you found anything in this lesson valuable. Looking forward to seeing you in another video soon, and thanks so much.